Hello and thank you for joining for tonight's stories. I hope you enjoy. Blackthorn Hollow. The dispatch tape played in a dimly lit briefing room, the voice distorted and panicked, cutting through static like a scream through water. It's mimicking Sergeant Harlow's voice. God, it's static, then silence. Captain Elias Voss leaned forward and pressed stop. The reel-to-reel recorder clicked, the tape going still. Around the table, 5 faces watched him with expressions ranging from grim determination to barely concealed fear. That was Team Sigma, Voss said, his voice gravelly from too many cigarettes and not enough sleep. They went dark 3 days ago, 20 personnel, best equipment, full tactical support. He let that hang in the air. We're next. Dr. Leon Nguyen shifted in her seat, adjusting her glasses. She was small, Vietnamese-American, with the intense focus of someone who had devoted her life to understanding things that shouldn't exist. The acoustic signature is fascinating. The mimicry is perfect, down to the micro-tremors in the vocal cords. That's not just sound reproduction. That's not why we're here, Doctor, Voss interrupted. We're here because Team Sigma is dead, and we need to find out what killed them. If they're dead, said Javier Rook Mendoza. He sat in the corner, shadows clinging to him like old friends. Ex-military, ex-mercenary, scarred from an encounter with something in the Yukon that he still wouldn't talk about. The tape doesn't confirm death, just disappearance. Same thing in Blackthorn Hollow. This from Daisy Carter, the tech specialist. She was young, too young for this kind of work, with dyed purple hair and fingers that never stopped moving, tapping, typing, twitching. She wore a small recorder on her lapel, always running. Voss knew she was documenting everything for her true crime podcast, but he allowed it. The society needed records, even if they were secret ones. People don't come back from Blackthorn Hollow. That's the pattern. Pattern implies predictability. The twins spoke in unison, as they often did. Riley and Morgan Shaw, paranormal investigators from some institute in Massachusetts that Voss had never heard of. Riley wore a cochlear implant, the device visible behind her ear, and Morgan was mute. They communicated through sign language that was so rapid and complex it looked almost like a dance. This is not predictable. This is chaotic. Chaotic how? Voss asked. Riley's hands moved and Morgan translated. The skinwalker in Blackthorn Hollow is old, ancient maybe. It's not following the standard patterns, it's evolving. Evolving, Voss rubbed his temples. Christ. The last member of the team hadn't spoken yet. Garrett Cole, new recruit, ex-cop from Chicago who had stumbled into the society's orbit after a routine missing persons case went sideways. He was big, muscular, with the skeptical expression of someone who still wasn't sure he believed in any of this. With respect, Captain, Garrett said, this sounds like bullshit. A creature that wears people's faces, mimics voices. I've been a cop for 10 years and I've never seen anything that couldn't be explained by. Rook, Voss nodded at the scarred man. Rook reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph. He slid it across the table to Garrett, who picked it up and went pale. What the hell is that? Team Sigma's last thermal image, Voss said, taken 40 minutes before that transmission. The photo showed a humanoid figure standing in a forest clearing. The thermal signature was wrong, not just the heat distribution but the structure. The figure had 5 joints in each limb. 5 arms that bent in too many places, legs that moved like a spider's. That's not human, Garrett whispered. No, Voss took the photo back. But it's wearing Sergeant Harlow's face. We have confirmation from facial recognition. Whatever that is, it's walking around with the team leader's features. Garrett was silent for a long moment. Then, what's the objective? Simple, Voss said. We go into Blackthorn Hollow. We locate Team Sigma's remains, if any exist. We identify and neutralize the threat, and we come back alive. Simple, Rook repeated, his voice dry. Right. The briefing continued for another hour. logistics, equipment, extraction protocols. Voss had done this dozens of times, led teams into places where the natural order had broken down, where things that shouldn't exist had found footholds. He had lost people. He had lost parts of himself. But he kept going because someone had to. When the meeting broke, he pulled Dr. Nguyen aside. "Your theory," he said, "the subharmonic vibrations." She nodded, eager to discuss her work. Skinwalkers don't just mimic voices. They manipulate sound at a fundamental level. The mimicry is actually a byproduct of their primary ability. They're broadcasting on frequencies that the human brain interprets as familiar voices. So it's not actually sounding like Harlow. It's making us think it sounds like Harlow. Exactly. Nguyen's eyes were bright with intellectual excitement, which means we can disrupt it. If we can broadcast counter-frequencies, we can break the illusion, make it sound like what it actually is. And what is it actually? Her expression sobered. "I don't know, but I don't think we want to find out." They deployed at 600 the next morning. 2 black SUVs, modified for off-road travel, loaded with equipment that would have raised eyebrows at any customs checkpoint. Silver nitrate rounds for Rook's modified tranquilizer rifle. Incendiary grenades blessed by a Navajo medicine man. Drones equipped with thermal and acoustic sensors. And Nguyen speakers, programmed to broadcast the counter-frequencies she had calculated. The drive to Blackthorn Hollow took 6 hours, through territory that grew progressively wilder. They passed through towns that seemed to huddle against the wilderness, their residents eyeing the SUVs with suspicion and fear. Everyone knew about Blackthorn Hollow. Everyone avoided it. "Local legends," Daisy said, narrating for her recorder. "The Hollow has been avoided for generations. Native American tribes, early settlers, modern residents, everyone agrees. Don't go into the Hollow. Don't follow the voices. Don't look at the trees." "Why the trees?" Garrett asked. "They grow wrong." Riley's hands moved, Morgan translating. "Spiral patterns, Fibonacci sequences that shouldn't exist in nature. The trees are changed." "Changed how?" "We don't know. Team Sigma was supposed to find out." They reached the Hollow at dusk. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of blood and bruise, and the forest before them seemed to drink the light rather than reflect it. The trees were visible from the road, tall, black, their branches spiraling upward in patterns that made Voss's eyes water if he looked too long. "Jesus," Garrett breathed, "those trees." "Don't stare," Voss ordered. "Equipment check, we move in 5. They geared up in silence, tactical vests with ceramic plates, weapons loaded with special ammunition, Nguyen speakers mounted on their backs, ready to broadcast. The twins placed sensors at the tree line, creating a perimeter that would alert them to movement. "Remember," Voss said, addressing the team, "stay together, don't follow voices, don't look at the trees, and if you see something wearing a face you recognize, don't trust it." "What if it's wearing my face?" Garrett asked, trying for humor but missing. "Then I'll shoot you," Rook said deadpan, "just to be safe." They entered the Hollow. The change was immediate. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. The light faded faster than it should have, as if the forest was swallowing the sun. And the silence, that aggressive, absolute silence that Voss had learned to associate with Skinwalker territory, settled over them like a blanket. "Acoustic dampening," Nguyen whispered, checking her equipment. "The trees are absorbing sound." "How is that possible?" "It's not." They moved in formation, Voss and Rook on point, the twins in the middle, Garrett and Daisy covering the rear. Nguyen walked between them, her equipment clicking and whirring, recording everything. The trees were worse up close. Their bark was black, not brown, and it seemed to shift when Voss wasn't looking directly at it. The spiral growth pattern was hypnotic, drawing the eye upward into branches that disappeared into darkness. "Don't look," Riley signed, and Morgan's voice was sharp. "The pattern traps you, makes you suggestible." Voss forced his eyes down, focusing on the ground. Pine needles, black as the trees, covering soil that seemed too dark, too rich. Here and there he saw bones, small animals mostly, but occasionally something larger. "Deer," Garrett said, pointing. "Maybe." Rook didn't sound convinced. They walked for an hour, following Team Sigma's last known coordinates. The GPS was unreliable, the signal jumping and skittering, but Nguyen had brought a compass that had been blessed by 3 different spiritual traditions. It pointed true, even when technology failed. "Camp ahead," Rook said, raising his fist. They stopped. Voss moved forward, weapon ready, and saw what remained of Team Sigma's base camp. Tents torn from the inside, fabric shredded by something with claws. Equipment scattered, radios, weapons, supplies all abandoned. And in the center of the clearing, arranged in a circle around a cold fire pit, were the bodies. Not bodies, Voss realized as he got closer. Just one body. Sergeant Harlow propped against a tree, his face. His face was gone. Not removed, not damaged, just absent. A smooth expanse of skin where features should have been, pale and waxy like a mannequin's head. "Oh God," Garrett said, turning away. "Quiet," Voss hissed. Because the faceless head was moving. The jaw, or where the jaw should be, was opening and closing, and from the empty space where a mouth should have been, a voice emerged. "You're late." Harlow's voice, perfect, absolute, coming from a face that no longer existed. "Team Sigma," the voice continued. "They were early, so eager, so delicious." "Weapons up," Voss shouted. They formed a circle, back to back, weapons trained on the tree line. The thing wearing Harlow's body, or what was left of it, didn't move. Just sat there, jaw working, voice coming from nowhere. "You brought the scientist," it said. "The one who thinks she understands. She doesn't. None of you do." "Activate the speakers," Voss ordered. Nguyen flipped a switch. The devices on their backs hummed to life, broadcasting the counter-frequencies she had calculated. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the voice changed. It was still Harlow's voice, but now it was layered, multiplied, dozens of voices speaking in unison, all coming from the faceless head. And beneath the human sounds, something else emerged, a wet, tearing noise like flesh being ripped, like bones being broken, like something ancient and hungry being pulled into the light. "Oh," Nguyen whispered, "oh no." The thing moved. It didn't stand up so much as unfold, joints bending in impossible directions, limbs extending to lengths that shouldn't have been possible. Harlow's body was just a shell, Voss realized, a costume stretched over something that had never been human. "Rook," Voss shouted. Rook fired. The silver nitrate round struck the creature in the chest, and it screamed, a sound that wasn't just auditory but physical, a pressure wave that knocked them all backward. Voss hit the ground hard, his ears ringing, his vision blurred. "Fall back," he tried to shout, but he couldn't hear his own voice. The creature was on them. It moved too fast, limbs scything through the air, and Voss saw Garrett go down, blood spraying from a wound that shouldn't have been possible. The creature's hand had entered and exited his shoulder without seeming to pass through the space between. "Garrett," Daisy screamed. The creature laughed, and it was Harlow's laugh, perfect and warm and utterly wrong. "New meat," it said, "fresh faces." Riley's cochlear implant suddenly emitted a high-pitched whine, and she clutched her head, screaming. The creature turned toward her, its faceless head tilting in what might have been curiosity. "Interesting," it said. "You hear differently, you hear more." It moved toward her, and Morgan stepped in front of her sister, signing furiously. The creature paused, and for a moment, Voss thought it might actually understand. Then it reached out and touched Morgan's hand. The effect was immediate. Morgan's hand went rigid, the fingers curling into a claw, and her face, her beautiful, expressive face, began to sag, the skin loosening, sliding, as if it was becoming something else. "No," Riley screamed, her voice raw. "Don't." The creature's face, or where its face should have been, suddenly rippled. Features emerged, pushing through the smooth skin like something being born. Morgan's features. Her eyes, her nose, her mouth, all appearing on the creature's head in a grotesque parody of humanity. "Sister," it said in Morgan's voice, "help me." Riley's scream was the most terrible sound Voss had ever heard. She lunged forward, knife in hand, and the creature caught her easily, its two long fingers wrapping around her throat. "Riley," Voss shouted, scrambling to his feet. "Nguyen, the speakers." "They're not working." Nguyen was frantically adjusting dials. "The frequency is wrong, it's—" The creature turned to look at her, Morgan's face still stretched across its skull, and smiled with Morgan's mouth. "Little scientist, you want to understand? Let me show you." It opened its mouth, Morgan's mouth, and from it emerged a sound that wasn't sound at all, but pure information, pure understanding, flooding into Nguyen's mind through her ears and her eyes and her skin. She screamed, the scream of someone who had seen too much, who understood too much, and collapsed. "Nguyen." Voss fired his weapon, emptying the magazine into the creature, but the bullets passed through it like it was made of smoke. "You cannot hurt me," the creature said, still wearing Morgan's face. "I am the Hollow, I am the Wearing, I am what remains when humanity is stripped away." Rook appeared behind it, incendiary grenade in hand. He pulled the pin and shoved it into the creature's back, where Harlow's spine should have been. The explosion was silent, the fire consuming sound as well as flesh. The creature screamed, Morgan's scream, Harlow's scream, dozens of other screams layered together and convulsed, its form blurring, shifting, trying to escape the flames. Now Rook shouted, "Run!" They ran. Voss grabbed Nguyen's unconscious body, slinging her over his shoulder. Daisy helped Garrett, who was bleeding but conscious, his face pale with shock. The twins, Riley was sobbing, clutching her sister's hand, but Morgan was gone, her face worn by the creature, her voice added to its collection. They ran through the forest, the trees reaching for them with spiraling branches, the darkness pressing in from all sides. Behind them the fire was dying, and Voss could hear the creature recovering, its laughter echoing through the hollow. "You cannot leave," it called in Morgan's voice, in Harlow's voice, in voices they didn't recognize. "You are already worn, you are already mine." They burst through the tree line into the clearing where they had left the SUVs. The vehicles were still there, untouched, engines still warm. They piled in, Voss driving, tires spinning on pine needles, and they were away, the hollow receding in the rearview mirror. But not far enough, never far enough. Nguyen woke up halfway back to base, screaming. It took 3 people to hold her down, and when she finally stopped struggling, her eyes were different, dilated, unfocused, seeing something that wasn't there. "It showed me," she whispered. "It showed me what they are, what they become." "What?" Voss asked, holding her hand. "What did you see?" "The Wearing." Nguyen's voice was distant, dreamy. "It's not just taking faces, it's becoming. Each face they wear, they become more real, more solid. Eventually, they don't need the faces anymore. They become themselves, something new, something old." "What does that mean?" "It means they're evolving." Nguyen's eyes focused suddenly, sharp with terror. "It means the old ways won't work forever. It means we're running out of time." She collapsed again, unconscious, and didn't wake for 3 days. When she finally did, she remembered nothing. The knowledge the creature had forced on her was gone, erased by her mind's own defenses. But Voss remembered. He remembered the faceless head, the too many joints, the way it had worn Morgan's features like a mask. He remembered the laughter. The debriefing was brutal. The society's leadership wanted answers, explanations, solutions. Voss had none. They had failed to retrieve Team Sigma's bodies. They had failed to neutralize the threat. They had lost Morgan Shaw and nearly lost Nguyen's sanity. But they had learned. The creature in Blackthorn Hollow was different from other skinwalkers. older, more powerful, evolving towards something that might not be killable by any means they possessed. "We need new weapons," Voss said at the final meeting. "New tactics. This thing, it's not just wearing faces anymore. It's becoming something else." "What do you suggest?" the director asked. Voss thought about the spiral trees, the faceless head, the way the creature had absorbed Morgan's features in seconds. "We need to understand what it's becoming, and we need to stop it before it gets there." "How?" "We go back." Voss met the director's eyes. "We go back with everything we have, and we burn that hollow to the ground." The director was silent for a long moment, then approved. They spent 3 weeks preparing. New weapons, new tactics, new team members to replace the ones they had lost. Voss requested and received permission to use incendiaries on a scale that would have been unthinkable before. But he knew, even as they planned, even as they armed themselves with fire and faith, that it wouldn't be enough. The thing in Blackthorn Hollow was old. It was patient. It had been wearing faces for longer than humans had been recording history. And it was waiting for them. 3 weeks of preparation, 3 weeks of nightmares, 3 weeks of listening to Morgan Shaw's voice echoing in Voss's memory, calling to him from the darkness of the hollow. The new team was larger, 12 members, heavily armed, equipped with weapons that pushed the boundaries of what the society could officially sanction. Flamethrowers with blessed fuel, sonic cannons that could shatter stone, and Nguyen's final gift before her breakdown, a device that broadcast on frequencies designed to disrupt the skinwalker's mimicry at the neurological level. "It won't kill it," she had said, her voice hollow, her eyes still haunted by whatever she had seen in the hollow. "But it will hurt it, make it vulnerable." "Vulnerable to what?" Voss had asked. "To being seen, to being known." She had gripped his arm, her nails digging in. "Captain, you have to understand, these things, they exist because we don't see them clearly. The wearing, the mimicry, it's all about perception. If you can force it to be itself just for a moment, you can hurt it." "How do we force it to be itself?" "Names." Nguyen had released him, retreating into herself. "True names, the name it had before it became. This. Find that and you have power over it." But they didn't know its name. They didn't know anything about it, except that it was old and hungry and endlessly patient. The second expedition entered Blackthorn Hollow at dawn. Voss had insisted on daylight, hoping that the sun would weaken the creature, though he knew it was a futile hope. The hollow was always dark. The spiral trees drank the light. They moved in 3 teams of 4, advancing in a wedge formation, weapons ready. Voss led Alpha Team with Rook at his side, 2 new recruits covering their flanks. Beta Team, led by a veteran named Chen, would establish a fire base at the tree line. Gamma Team, led by Daisy, now officially a field operative, her podcast dreams abandoned in the face of reality, would handle communications and Nguyen's disruption device. "Remember," Voss said over the comms as they crossed into the hollow, "stay in visual contact. If you lose sight of your team, you're already dead." The forest was worse than he remembered. The spiral trees had grown, their branches reaching across the path like grasping fingers. The silence was deeper, more aggressive, pressing against his eardrums like water pressure. "Acoustic dampening at 90%, Daisy reported. "I'm boosting the comm signal, but we're going to lose range fast." "Understood, move out." They walked for an hour, following the path Team Sigma had taken. The remains of the first camp were still there, torn tents, scattered equipment, the tree where Harlow's faceless body had sat. But the body was gone. "It moved," Rook said, checking the area. "Recently, within the last few days." "Where?" Rook pointed deeper into the hollow toward a ridge where the trees grew thickest. "Up there, I can see something." Voss followed his gaze. Through the spiral branches, barely visible, was a structure, not natural, built. "What is that?" "Team Sigma's forward observation post," Daisy said, checking her tablet. They established it on day 2. Last transmission came from there. Then that's where we're going. The climb was brutal. The spiral trees seemed to shift as they passed, branches brushing against them, leaving marks on their armor that looked almost deliberate. Twice, Voss thought he saw faces in the bark, Harlow's, Morgan's, others he didn't recognize, but when he looked directly, they were gone. Don't look at the trees, he reminded his team. Eyes forward. They reached the observation post at noon, though the sun was invisible behind the canopy. The structure was a ruin, walls torn open from the inside, equipment smashed, blood staining the floor in patterns that looked almost deliberate. Ritual, Rook said, examining the stains. Sacrifice. Of what? Of who? Rook pointed to the corner where a pile of objects had been arranged with care. Watches, wedding rings, dog tags, personal effects, all belonging to Team Sigma. Trophies, Voss said. More than that. Daisy was photographing everything, her hands steady despite the horror. It's building something, a collection like a shrine. To what? To itself. The voice came from everywhere at once, surrounding them like the silence had. It was Morgan's voice, perfect and warm and utterly wrong. Welcome back, Captain. Weapons up, Voss shouted, but he knew it was too late. The creature was already among them. It moved like smoke, like shadow, appearing between the trees in fragments. A hand here, a face there, limbs that bent in too many directions. It wasn't wearing a single face now. It was wearing all of them, features shifting across its surface like a slideshow of the dead. You brought more faces, it said in Harlow's voice, in Morgan's voice, in voices Voss didn't recognize. How generous. Fire, Voss ordered. They opened up, bullets and flames and Nguyen's disruption frequency all at once. The creature screamed, a sound like tearing metal, like breaking glass, like the death of stars, and convulsed, its form blurring, shifting, trying to escape the assault. It's working, Daisy shouted. Keep firing. But the creature adapted. It always adapted. The bullets passed through it, the flames bent around it, and the disruption frequency seemed to slide off its skin like water. You think you can hurt me? It laughed, and the laughter was layered, multiplied, coming from everywhere at once. I am the wearing, I am the becoming, I am what you fear when you look in the mirror. It moved, too fast. One of the new recruits, Voss didn't even catch his name, went down, screaming, as the creature's hand entered his chest and emerged with something clutched in its fingers. The recruit's face, still screaming, still alive, being pulled from his skull like a mask. No, Voss fired again, emptying his magazine, but the creature just laughed and added the new face to its collection, features rippling across its surface. Retreat, Voss ordered. Fall back to the firebase. They ran, dragging the wounded, leaving the dead. The creature didn't follow immediately. It was busy with its new acquisition, learning the face, adding the voice to its collection. But Voss could hear it behind them, laughing, singing, calling to them in voices they couldn't ignore. Riley misses her sister, Morgan's voice from the trees to their left. She cries at night, she blames herself. Shut up, Voss shouted, knowing he was playing into its hands, unable to stop himself. Garrett dreams of Chicago. The voice shifted, becoming Garrett's, though Garrett was running beside him, alive and terrified. He dreams of the case that brought him here, the missing children, the faces in the walls. How does it know? Garrett gasped. It knows everything, Voss said. It wears our memories, our fears. They reached the fire base at dusk, Chen's team providing covering fire as they stumbled into the perimeter. The creature stopped at the tree line, watching them with eyes that shifted color and shape, wearing a dozen faces at once. You cannot leave, it called. You are already worn. I have your voices, I have your fears. I will wear you all in time. Like hell you will. Voss grabbed a flamethrower from Chen's supplies. Burn the trees. Captain. The trees burned them all. They unleashed hell. Blessed napalm, holy oil, incendiaries designed to burn even in vacuum. The spiral trees caught fire, burning with flames that were black instead of orange, that seemed to absorb light rather than emit it. The creature screamed. Real pain this time, not theatrical, not performed. The trees were part of it, Voss realized, connected to it. Hurting the trees hurt the creature. More, he shouted, keep burning. The hollow became an inferno. The spiral trees twisted in the flames, their branches reaching toward the sky like hands in supplication or accusation. The creature retreated, its form blurring, losing coherence, faces sliding off its surface like water. We have to follow, Rook said, while it's weak. We will. Voss grabbed a fresh weapon. Chen, hold the perimeter, everyone else with me. They advanced into the fire, protected by suits designed for extreme heat, following the creature's trail. It was retreating toward the center of the hollow, toward something that the flames had revealed, a cave mouth, previously hidden, now gaping like a wound in the earth. Its den, Daisy said, where it becomes. Where it keeps the faces, Voss corrected, where it keeps the voices. They entered the cave. The interior was worse than anything Voss had imagined. The walls were lined with faces, not masks, not trophies, but actual human faces, stretched and preserved, still alive, still screaming silently. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Team Sigma, Morgan, faces Voss didn't recognize going back decades, centuries, maybe longer. Oh God, Garrett whispered. Oh my God. Don't look, Voss ordered, but it was impossible not to look. The faces were everywhere, watching them with eyes that still moved, mouths that still tried to speak. The creature was at the center of the cave, collapsed against a wall of faces, its form flickering, unstable. It wasn't wearing any face now, just a smooth expanse of skin, pale and waxy, featureless except for a mouth that opened and closed in silent screams. You hurt me, it gasped, and its voice was just one voice now, not layered, not multiplied, raw, real. No one has hurt me in so long. Good, Voss raised his weapon. We're going to do more than hurt you. Wait, the creature held up a hand and Voss saw that it was shaking. I can offer something. What could you possibly offer? Knowledge. The creature's voice was weak, but there was something in it, cunning, desperation, the intelligence of something ancient and patient. I am old, Captain, older than your civilization, older than your species. I have seen so much. I don't care what you've seen. But you should. The creature tried to rise, failed, collapsed again. You think I am the only one. You think this hollow is the only place where the wearing happens. There are others, dozens, hundreds, all across your world, and they are waking up. Waking up. Evolving, becoming. The creature's voice gained strength. I was like them once, just a skinwalker, a witch who chose power, but I grew, I learned, I became something more. And now they are learning from me, following my path. You're saying there are more like you. There will be, the creature smiled, though it had no face to smile with, unless you stop them, and I can tell you how. Why would you help us? Because I am dying. The creature gestured at the burning hollow above them. Your fire, it reaches deep, it will consume me, and I would rather pass on my knowledge than let it die with me. Voss hesitated. He knew it was a trick, knew that the creature was manipulating him, but the knowledge, the chance to understand, to prepare, to fight, was too tempting to ignore. Talk. The wearing is not just taking faces. It is becoming. Each face I wear, I become more real, more solid. Eventually, I will not need faces at all. I will be, myself, something new. How do we stop it? You cannot. The creature laughed, weak but genuine. Not once it has begun. The only way is to prevent the transformation, to kill the skinwalker before it evolves. How? Names, true names, the name they had before they chose the witchery way. The creature's voice was fading now, the fire above reaching deeper. Find the name, speak it. Force them to remember what they were. In that moment they are vulnerable. We tried that, it didn't work on you. Because I have no name. The creature's form was blurring, losing coherence. I forgot it, so long ago, I am only, the wearing now, the becoming. Then how did we hurt you? The trees. The creature gestured at the walls, at the faces that were finally going still as the fire consumed them. They were, my memories, my collection. Without them, I am nothing. The cave was collapsing now, the fire reaching down, the faces screaming their final screams. The creature convulsed, its form dissolving, becoming smoke and shadow and memory. Remember, it whispered, its last words echoing in Voss's mind. The others are waking, the wearing spreads, you cannot stop it, only slow it down. Then it was gone. They ran, the cave collapsing behind them, and emerged into the hollow to find it transformed. The spiral trees were ash, the silence broken, the sky visible for the first time in decades. The hollow was just a hollow now, a depression in the earth, nothing special, nothing terrible. But Voss knew it was a lie. The creature was gone, but its words remained. The wearing was spreading. Others were waking, evolving, becoming. The war was just beginning. They buried their dead at the edge of the hollow, marking the graves with stones and prayers. 12 had entered. 6 had returned. The price of victory, if it could be called victory. Nguyen met them at the extraction point, her eyes clearer than they had been, though still haunted. You killed it. We destroyed its form, Voss said, but I'm not sure we killed it, not really. What do you mean? It said it was becoming something, that the wearing was just a stage. Voss looked back at the hollow, now just a scar in the earth. I think we just forced it to move to the next stage, whatever that is. Nguyen was silent for a long moment. Then, we need to prepare. For what? For what's coming. She met his eyes, and Voss saw the fear there, the understanding of something too big to comprehend. If there are more like it, if they're all evolving, we need new weapons, new tactics, new understanding. Then we get them. Voss climbed into the extraction vehicle, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. We have the society, we have resources, we have knowledge. Do we have enough? Voss thought about the faces in the cave, the voices in the dark, the creature's final words. We have to. They drove back to base in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Voss thought about Morgan Shaw, about Riley's screams, about the way the creature had worn her sister's face like a mask. He thought about the other skinwalkers out there, the ones who were watching, learning, evolving. He thought about the wearing and how it was spreading. The debriefing took 3 days. The society's leadership wanted every detail, every observation, every word the creature had spoken. Voss gave it to them, holding nothing back, not even his own failures. We need to expand, the director said at the final meeting. More teams, more resources, more hunters. We need more than that, Voss said. We need to understand what we're fighting. These things, they're not just monsters, they're becoming something, evolving. We need to evolve too. How? Voss thought about Nguyen's research, about the disruption frequencies, about the true names. We start by learning their language, their nature. We stop treating them like animals and start treating them like a civilization, an enemy civilization. That's a dangerous path, Captain. All paths are dangerous. Voss stood facing the director. But the alternative is extinction. They are learning, they are growing. If we don't do the same, we lose. The director was silent for a long moment, then approved. They spent the next year building new research facilities, new weapons programs, new training protocols. Voss led the effort, driven by memories of the hollow, of the faces, of the creature's laughter. Riley Shaw joined them, her cochlear implant replaced with a device of Nguyen's design that could detect skinwalker frequencies. She never spoke of Morgan, but she hunted with a ferocity that made even Rook step carefully. Garrett became an instructor, teaching new recruits what he had learned about fear and survival. He never forgot the creature's words about his dreams, but he used them, turned them into motivation. And Daisy became the society's archivist, documenting everything, building a database of encounters that would eventually become the most comprehensive resource on skinwalkers in existence. Her podcast was forgotten, replaced by something more important. But Voss never forgot the creature's final warning: the others are waking, the wearing spreads. He saw it in the reports that crossed his desk. Skinwalker encounters increasing. The creatures becoming bolder, more organized, more intelligent. They were learning from each other, sharing knowledge, evolving towards something that Voss could barely comprehend. And then came the message. It arrived on a Tuesday, encoded in a frequency that only Nguyen's equipment could detect. A transmission from somewhere in the wilderness, somewhere deep and dark and old. Captain Voss. The voice was layered, multiplied, but beneath it, Voss could hear something familiar. We remember you. We remember the Hollow. We are coming. Who is this? Voss demanded. We are the wearing. We are the becoming. We are what you made us. The voice shifted, becoming a chorus, dozens of voices speaking in unison. You burned our brother. You destroyed his collection, but you did not destroy him. You only freed him. Freed him. He is with us now, part of us. We are learning from him, growing, becoming. The voice was closer now, though the transmission came from hundreds of miles away. Thank you, Captain. Thank you for showing us the way. The transmission ended. Voss sat in his office, the message echoing in his mind, and understood at last what they had done. They hadn't killed the creature in Blackthorn Hollow. They had helped it evolve. They had shown all of them, how to become something more. The wearing was spreading, and they had accelerated it. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the training grounds where new recruits were learning to fight monsters. Young men and women who didn't yet understand what they were facing, who thought they could win. We're not hunting them anymore, Voss whispered to himself. They're hunting us. And somewhere in the darkness, in the deep woods and the hollow places where the light didn't reach, something that had once been human laughed with 100 voices and began to plan. The war was coming, and this time Voss wasn't sure they would survive it. 1 year after Blackthorn Hollow burned, Captain Elias Voss stood in a briefing room and looked at the faces of the dead. They covered the wall, photographs, hundreds of them arranged in a pattern that seemed almost deliberate. Team Sigma, Morgan Shaw, the recruits lost in the second expedition, and the new ones, the ones who had died in the months since, as the skinwalkers grew bolder, smarter, more organized. We're losing, Voss said, and the words tasted like ash. The room was silent. Around the table sat the survivors of his various teams, Rook, scarred and grim, Daisy, her purple hair now streaked with gray, Riley Shaw, her mechanical ear catching frequencies no human should hear, Garrett, solid and dependable, and Dr. Nguyen, recovered from her breakdown but never quite whole. The skinwalkers are evolving faster than we can adapt, Voss continued. They're sharing information, learning from each other, becoming something collective. Like a hive mind, Daisy asked. Like a civilization. Voss pulled up a map on the screen behind him, red dots scattered across the continental United States. These are confirmed skinwalker territories. 3 years ago there were 12, now there are 47, and they're not just hunting anymore. They're settling, building. Building what? Garrett asked. We don't know. Voss changed the image, showing satellite photos of the largest territory, a forest in northern Montana where the trees had begun to spiral like those in Blackthorn Hollow. But whatever it is, it's growing, and it's learning from what happened to their brother. The thing in Blackthorn Hollow, Rook said, you think it's still alive? I think it's become something else. Voss pulled up the final image, a thermal reading from the Montana Territory showing a massive heat signature that shouldn't exist. I think it's become their teacher, their prophet. Nguyen leaned forward, her eyes sharp despite the shadows beneath them. The transmission, the one that claimed you freed it. Yes. You think it's telling the truth, that destroying its physical form helped it evolve. I think we made a mistake. Voss sat down, suddenly exhausted. I think we treated it like an animal, like something we could kill with fire and bullets. But it's not an animal, it's becoming something more. And we helped it get there. So what do we do? Riley asked, her voice rough from disuse. She rarely spoke anymore, preferring the silence her sister had taught her. We changed tactics. Voss pulled out a file, slid it across the table. Project Mirror. Daisy opened it, scanning the contents. Mirrors. You're suggesting we fight them with mirrors. Navajo lore says skinwalkers hate their reflections, that mirrors can trap them, hurt them. Voss met her eyes. What if that's not just folklore? What if it's physics? Physics how? Nguyen's research, the disruption frequencies. Voss turned to the doctor. Tell them. Nguyen stood, moving to the whiteboard. The skinwalker's mimicry is based on perception manipulation. They don't actually change shape, they change how we perceive them, but mirrors reflect light differently than eyes do. They show truth, unfiltered reality. So a mirror would show what they actually are, Rook said, not what they want us to see. Exactly. Nguyen drew a diagram, light waves, perception filters, the gap between reality and observation. If we can force them to see themselves, force them to confront their true nature, we might be able to disrupt the wearing, break the mimicry. And then we kill them. Voss's voice was hard. While they're vulnerable, while they're confused, we hit them with everything we have. It's risky, Garrett said, if it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, we're dead anyway. Voss stood, facing his team. But I think it will work. I think the mirrors are the key. I think we've been fighting these things with the wrong weapons for too long. When do we move? Rook asked. 3 days. Voss gathered his files. We hit the Montana Territory. We find whatever they're building, and we burn it to the ground, but this time we do it with mirrors. The preparation was intense. They gathered every mirror they could find, hand mirrors, bathroom mirrors, industrial sheets of reflective glass. Nguyen developed a coating that amplified the reflective properties, creating surfaces that showed not just light but truth, she called it, unfiltered reality. They also prepared the usual weapons, white ash, silver nitrate, incendiaries. But the mirrors were the key. The mirrors were the hope. They deployed at dawn on the 3rd day, a convoy of vehicles loaded with glass and fire. 12 team members, heavily armed, heavily protected, armed with knowledge that had cost them dearly. The Montana Territory was worse than the reports had suggested. The spiral trees were everywhere, covering acres, their branches reaching toward the sky in patterns that hurt to look at. And in the center of the forest, visible from the road, was a structure. It looked like a cathedral made of bone and wood, spiraling upward like the trees around it. Windows covered every surface, and in each window, Voss could see faces. Hundreds of faces. Thousands. My God, Daisy whispered, what is that? Their nest, Nguyen said, their church. The becoming, Voss said, remembering the creature's words. This is where they evolve, where they become what they're meant to be. Then we destroy it, Rook said, checking his weapons. Yes, Voss grabbed a mirror, feeling its weight in his hands. We destroy it all. They advanced in formation, mirrors raised, weapons ready. The forest was silent, but Voss could feel the attention on them. Hundreds of eyes watching from the trees, from the structure, from the shadows themselves. They're waiting, Riley said, her mechanical ear twitching. They know we're here. Let them know, Voss raised his voice. We're not hiding anymore. They reached the structure's entrance. A door made of faces, literally, human features stretched and woven together into a barrier that seemed to breathe. Voss didn't hesitate. He raised his mirror and pressed it against the door. The effect was immediate. The faces screamed, a sound like tearing metal, and the door convulsed, trying to pull away from the mirror's touch. But Voss held firm, and slowly the faces began to dissolve, revealing the wood beneath. "It works," Daisy shouted. "The mirrors work." They pushed through the door, into the structure's interior. It was worse than the cave in Blackthorn Hollow, worse than anything Voss had imagined. The walls were lined with faces, yes, but these faces were connected, woven together, forming a tapestry of suffering that seemed almost alive. And in the center of the space, suspended from the ceiling by strands of something that looked like sinew, was a figure. It was the creature from Blackthorn Hollow, or rather what it had become. No longer wearing faces, it had become something else entirely, a form of pure shadow, pure potential, shifting and flowing like smoke made solid. "Captain Voss." The voice came from everywhere, layered and multiplied, but beneath it, Voss could hear the original, the creature from the hollow, the one he had burned. "You came." "I came to finish what I started." "You cannot finish what has already begun." The figure descended, touching the floor, and Voss saw that it cast no shadow. "I am beyond your weapons now, beyond your fire. I am the becoming, the first of many. Then we'll stop the others." "Will you?" The figure laughed, and the laughter was like breaking glass. "Look around you, Captain. Look at what we have built." Voss looked, and he saw. The faces on the walls weren't just trophies. They were components, parts of something larger. The structure itself was alive in a way, a machine made of flesh and fear, designed to create more like the figure before him. "You're building an army," Voss said. "We are building a species." The figure moved closer, and Voss saw that it had no face of its own, just a smooth expanse of shadow that seemed to drink the light. "The wearing was just the beginning, the larval stage. We are becoming something new, something better." "You're monsters." "We are evolution." The figure gestured, and the faces on the walls began to move, to speak, their voices blending into a chorus. "You humans, you cling to your humanity like a drowning man clings to a raft. But humanity is just a stage, a step on the path. We have chosen to move beyond it. By killing, by wearing people's faces. By becoming." The figure was close now, close enough to touch, and Voss could feel the cold radiating from it. "Each face we wear, we learn. Each voice we steal, we grow. We become more than we were, more than human." "And what happens when you've worn everyone? When there are no more faces to steal?" The figure paused. For a moment something flickered in its form, doubt perhaps, or memory. "Then we will be complete. Or you'll be alone." Voss raised his mirror, holding it between them. "Let's find out." He pressed the mirror against the figure's chest. The scream was unlike anything Voss had ever heard. It was the sound of a soul being torn apart, of identity being stripped away, of something ancient and terrible being forced to confront what it had become. The figure convulsed, its form blurring, losing coherence. For a moment, Voss saw something beneath the shadow, a face, human, terrified, the face of whoever this thing had been before it chose the witchery way. "No," the figure gasped. "No, I am beyond this, I am." "You are nothing," Voss said, and pressed harder. The mirror shattered, but the damage was done. The figure was unraveling, its form destabilizing, the shadow breaking apart into fragments that screamed and clawed at the air. "Now," Voss shouted, "all of them." His team moved, raising mirrors, pressing them against the walls of faces. The structure convulsed, the faces screaming in unison, the entire building seeming to breathe in pain. "It's working," Nguyen shouted. "Keep going." They worked their way through the structure, mirror by mirror, face by face, forcing the skinwalkers to confront their true natures. Some dissolved into ash. Others collapsed, weeping, human again for just a moment before the weight of their sins crushed them. But the figure, the first becoming, was still fighting. It had retreated to the center of the structure, gathering the remaining shadows to itself, trying to rebuild what the mirrors had torn apart. Voss, it screamed, and its voice was just one voice now, raw and terrified. You don't understand what you're doing. We are the future, we are. You're a mistake. Voss raised his weapon, not a mirror this time, but a blade tipped with white ash and silver nitrate, and I'm correcting it. He struck. The blade entered the figure's chest, and for a moment time seemed to stop. Voss saw the creature's true face, not the shadow, not the monster, but the human it had been. A man, young once, scared always. Someone who had made a choice long ago and never stopped paying for it. Thank you, the man whispered. Then he dissolved into light. The structure collapsed. Not physically, the wood and stone remained, but spiritually. The faces went silent. The shadows dispersed. The wearing ended, at least for this place, at least for now. Voss stood in the center of the ruin, surrounded by his team, and felt the weight of what they had done. They had killed a god or something like it. They had stopped an evolution. But they hadn't won, not really. It's not over, Nguyen said, reading his expression. There are others. I know. Voss looked at the faces on the walls, now still, now silent. But we know how to fight them now. We know what works. Mirrors, Daisy said, holding up a fragment of broken glass. Who would have thought? Not just mirrors. Voss turned to face his team. Truth, reality, forcing them to see what they've become. That's what hurts them. That's what kills them. Then we keep fighting, Rook said, until there are none left. Until there are none left, Voss agreed. They burned the structure anyway, just to be sure. The spiral trees caught fire and burned with black flames, just like in Blackthorn Hollow, and when the ash settled, the territory was just forest again. Just trees, just silence. But Voss knew they were still out there. The other skinwalkers, the other colonies, the ones who were still wearing, still becoming, still evolving towards something humanity might not survive. The war continued. 6 months later, Voss stood in a new briefing room, looking at a new map with new red dots. The skinwalkers had adapted, as he knew they would. They were avoiding mirrors now, attacking from darkness, from behind, from places where reflection couldn't reach. But the society had adapted too. New weapons, new tactics, new hunters trained in the ways of truth and light. And they had something else, something the skinwalkers hadn't expected. We have survivors, Voss said, addressing the new team. People who have been worn and returned. People who have seen what these things are and lived to tell about it. Returned, a young recruit asked. I thought once they wore you, you were gone. Most are. Voss thought about the faces on the walls, the voices in the dark. But some fight back. Some remember who they are even while wearing another face. And those people, they have knowledge, understanding. What kind of knowledge? The kind that can kill. Voss pulled up a photograph, a woman middle-aged, her face scarred but intact. This is Sarah Chen. She was worn by a skinwalker for 3 days. She remembers everything, how it felt, how it thought, what it feared. And what did it fear? Being forgotten. Voss met the recruit's eyes. These things, they wear our faces because they don't have their own anymore. They steal our voices because they've forgotten how to speak. They're trying to become human again, but they can't. So they just keep taking. That's sad, the recruit said. It's terrifying. Voss turned back to the map. Because it means they'll never stop. They can't stop. The wearing is all they have. So how do we stop them? We remind them. Voss tapped the map, the red dots scattered across the country. We find their true names, we force them to remember, and then we end them. The recruit was silent for a moment. Then, is that what happened to the thing in Blackthorn Hollow, the one that became something else? Voss thought about the shadow figure, the young man's face beneath the monster, the whispered thank you as it died. Yes, we reminded it, and it remembered, and in that moment of memory it was vulnerable. Could they all be saved? No, Voss's voice was hard. Most are too far gone. The wearing consumes them, destroys what they were. The thing in Blackthorn Hollow was an exception, old enough, powerful enough to retain some fragment of humanity. The rest are just monsters. Then we kill them. We kill them, Voss nodded, all of them until the wearing stops. The team deployed at dusk, moving into territory that had been marked as active for 3 months. 12 hunters, armed with mirrors and ash and truth. Voss watched them go from the command vehicle, feeling the familiar mix of pride and fear. These were good people, brave people. They didn't deserve what they were facing. But someone had to face it. Someone had to hunt the monsters. His radio crackled. "Captain, we've got movement. 2 figures approaching from the east." Visual. Negative, too dark, but we're getting voice signatures, sounds like children. Don't listen. Voss gripped the radio. It's mimicry, keep your mirrors ready. Understood. He waited, listening to the reports as they came in. Contact. Engagement. The mirrors working, forcing the skinwalkers to reveal themselves. The ash finishing what the mirrors started. 2 more dead, 2 more faces freed. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. As long as humans could choose the witchery way, as long as the path to becoming existed, there would be skinwalkers. The only way to truly end it was to end the choice. And that, Voss knew, was impossible. He leaned back in his seat, suddenly exhausted. 10 years of hunting, 10 years of death and fire and faces in the dark. And for what? The skinwalkers were still out there, still wearing, still becoming. But they were also dying. Slowly, surely, hunted by the society and others like it. The balance was shifting, the war was turning. Maybe in another 10 years they would have won. Maybe the wearing would end, the hollows would be silent, and humanity could sleep without fear. Or maybe not. Maybe the skinwalkers would evolve again, become something new, something the mirrors couldn't touch. Either way, Voss would be there, fighting, hunting, remembering the faces on the walls, the voices in the dark, the thing that had become something more. He would remember Blackthorn Hollow, and he would keep fighting. Until the end. Below the Mountain, a Skinwalker horror story. Chapter 1, Arrival. The Appalachian Mountains didn't welcome visitors. They tolerated them. I learned this truth on the 3rd Tuesday of October, when the government SUV deposited me at the mouth of a service tunnel that shouldn't have existed according to any map I'd ever studied. My name is Dr. Elena Vance, and until 6 weeks ago, I was a postdoctoral researcher in cryptozoological anthropology at Johns Hopkins. Now I stood at the threshold of something that would redefine my understanding of fear, of reality, of what it meant to be human. The email had arrived with no subject line, no signature block, just coordinates and a time. The offer, if you could call it that, was non-negotiable. 6 months at a black site facility, studying the impossible, with the understanding that I would never speak of what I saw. I should have said no. God help me, I should have turned around and driven back to Baltimore, back to my cramped apartment with its water-stained ceiling and the neighbor's cat that yowled at 3 a.m. But I didn't. The curiosity that had driven me to pursue cryptid research, that dangerous, obsessive need to know what lurked at the edges of human experience, proved stronger than my survival instinct. The tunnel entrance yawned before me, a concrete maw set into the mountainside like a wound that had never healed. No signage marked its purpose. No guard stood watch. Just a single security camera mounted above the entrance, its red light blinking with metronomic regularity. I checked my phone one last time. No signal, as expected, and stepped inside. The temperature dropped 20 degrees within 10 feet. My breath fogged the air, and I pulled my jacket tighter against the unnatural chill. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in that particular shade of institutional white that made skin look sallow and dead. The tunnel stretched ahead for what seemed like miles, sloping downward at a gentle angle that my inner ear registered as wrong, as though gravity itself bent differently here. I walked for 15 minutes before I heard the elevator. The sound preceded it, a mechanical groan like the mountain itself protesting this violation of its depths. Then the doors slid open, revealing a car large enough to hold a semi-truck. A woman stood inside, her white lab coat immaculate, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun that seemed to pull her features taut. She looked me up and down with eyes the color of washed-out denim, and I felt immediately cataloged, assessed, filed away. "Dr. Vance," she said, it wasn't a question. "I'm Dr. Voss. Welcome to Mountaineer Black Site 7. I stepped into the elevator, and the doors closed with a finality that made my stomach clench. "How far down are we going?" I asked, trying for casual and landing somewhere near terrified. Dr. Voss pressed a button labeled simply 90, and the elevator began its descent. "The facility extends 100 floors below the surface. You'll be working primarily in Section 9, floors 90 through 99. 99 floors, that's deeper than most military bunkers. Subject 17 requires special containment." She said this as though discussing laboratory equipment, but something in her tone, too controlled, too careful, suggested depths I couldn't yet comprehend. The elevator didn't descend smoothly. It moved in sections, stopping at intervals that Dr. Voss explained corresponded to different research tiers. Floor 10, administrative offices. Floor 20, living quarters. Floor 30, medical facilities. Each stop lasted only seconds, just long enough for me to glimpse sterile corridors and the occasional passing figure in similar white coats. "Section 8, Dr. Voss announced at floor 80, is our general research division. Biological studies, behavioral analysis, standard cryptid taxonomy." I pressed my face against the glass, trying to see what lay beyond the doors. The corridor stretched away into darkness, only a few emergency lights casting red pools on the floor. "Why is it so dark?" "Routine maintenance." Dr. Voss didn't look at me. "Power fluctuations are common this deep." But I noticed her hand had moved to the elevator's emergency stop button, resting there with the casual readiness of someone who had used it before. I noticed, too, that the darkness beyond Section 8 seemed to pulse, seemed to breathe, seemed to watch us pass with an awareness that made my skin prickle. We passed Section 8 without stopping, and the elevator continued its descent into depths that shouldn't have been possible, into spaces that felt less like human construction, and more like something the mountain had always contained, something we had merely uncovered and tried to cage. "Section 9, Dr. Voss said, and the doors opened onto a nightmare I would never escape. Chapter 2, The Team. Floor 90 looked nothing like the upper sections. Where those had been sterile, institutional, almost aggressively normal, this place breathed with a different atmosphere entirely. The walls were reinforced concrete 2 feet thick, lined with something that looked like lead sheeting but smelled like ozone and old blood. Red emergency lights provided the only illumination, casting everything in shades of crimson and shadow. "This is the nerve center," Dr. Voss said, leading me through a security checkpoint that required retinal scanning, palm print verification, and a voice recognition sequence. "From here, we monitor all activity in the lower containment levels." The control room was smaller than I expected, maybe 20 feet square, with monitors covering every wall. Most displayed static or empty corridors, but a few showed things that made me look twice, then look away. A room filled with what appeared to be bones arranged in geometric patterns, a forest that couldn't possibly exist this far underground, and one screen mercifully dark, labeled simply Subject 17, Active Containment. 3 people occupied the room, and they all turned to stare at me with the hollow-eyed intensity of the sleep-deprived and traumatized. "Team," Dr. Voss said, "this is Dr. Alina Vance, our new cryptid anthropologist. Dr. Vance, meet what's left of the research team." The words "what's left" hung in the air like smoke. A man in his 50s with a gray beard and trembling hands stepped forward first. "Dr. Marcus Webb," he said, his voice raspy with disuse. "Biological specialist. I've been here 8 months." 8 months? I couldn't keep the shock from my voice. "Standard rotation is 6 weeks. Webb's laugh was bitter and brief. "Standard rotation doesn't apply to Section 9. Not anymore." A woman in her 30s with close-cropped black hair and a scar running from her left temple to her jawline nodded in my direction. "Dr. Sarah Chen, Security and Containment Protocols. I've been here 4 months." 4 months since the incident, the third person said, a young man who couldn't have been more than 25, with the kind of handsome features that looked wrong on someone so obviously broken. "I'm David Okonkwo. I was an intern. I'm all that's left of the previous containment team." Dr. Voss cleared her throat. "David exaggerates. The previous team was reassigned following a containment breach. That's all." But David's hands were shaking, and he wouldn't meet my eyes, and I knew with the certainty of someone who had spent their career studying things that didn't want to be understood, that reassigned meant something else entirely. "How many people work in Section 9? I asked. 5, Dr. Voss said, "now that you're here." 5 for a facility this size. "We had 23 researchers and support staff 6 months ago." Webb's voice was flat, factual, devastating. "Then we attempted to move Subject 17 to an upgraded containment unit. 12 died in the initial breach. 6 more in the following week. The rest left, couldn't handle it." Couldn't handle what? No one answered. The monitors hummed with static, and somewhere in the depths below us, something made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your quarters are on floor 91, Dr. Voss said, breaking the silence. "We eat at 600, 1200, and 1800. The mess hall is on floor 92. Beyond that, you don't go anywhere without an escort. You don't access any lower floors without my express permission. And you never, under any circumstances, attempt to communicate with Subject 17. Is that understood?" I nodded, my throat too dry for speech. "Good. Dr. Chen will show you to your room. We begin work tomorrow at 800. Chen led me through corridors that felt more like tunnels, the red emergency lights casting our shadows in strange directions. My quarters were barely larger than a closet. A narrow bed, a desk with a locked drawer, a small bathroom with a shower that ran either scalding or freezing with no middle ground. "The previous occupant was Dr. Patricia Vance," Chen said, noticing me staring at the nameplate still attached to the door. "No relation, she didn't make it." "Didn't make it?" "The breach, she was on the containment team." Chen's scar seemed to pulse in the red light. "You should sleep while you can. Tomorrow you'll see Subject 17, and after that you'll understand why we don't sleep much." She left me alone with the ghost of Patricia Vance, and the growing certainty that I had made the worst mistake of my life. I didn't sleep. I lay on the narrow bed and listened to the sounds of the facility, the hum of generators, the distant clank of machinery, and beneath it all something else. Something that sounded like breathing, like waiting, like hunger. At 3 a.m. I heard footsteps in the corridor outside my door. Slow, deliberate, wrong. They stopped at my door and I held my breath, paralyzed with a fear I couldn't name. Then a voice, Dr. Voss's voice, whispered, "Dr. Vance, are you awake?" I didn't answer, I couldn't. The fear had frozen me solid. The footsteps continued down the hall, but they sounded different now. Heavier, more numerous, as though whatever wore Dr. Voss's shape had grown extra legs, extra weight, extra wrongness. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, and when the alarm sounded at 600, I rose with the certainty that something had been outside my door, something that had wanted me to know it was there. Chapter 3: First Encounter. Breakfast was a silent affair. The mess hall on floor 92 had been designed to feed 50 people, but only 5 of us sat at a long table meant for 20, picking at rehydrated eggs and powdered coffee that tasted like burnt metal. "Today's the day," Webb said, not looking up from his plate. "She always shows them on the second day, after they've had a night to acclimate." "Shows them what?" I asked, though I knew. God, I knew. "Subject 17. David's voice cracked on the words. "She wants you to understand what we're dealing with, what you're dealing with." "And what are we dealing with?" Chen finally looked at me, her dark eyes reflecting the fluorescent lights with an emptiness that spoke of things seen and unforgotten. "A skinwalker, a Yi Naldlushia. The Navajo have stories about them going back centuries. Creatures that can wear the skin of any animal, any person. That can mimic voices, faces, memories. That feed on fear and flesh and the boundaries between what we think is real and what hides in the dark." "But this one's different," Webb added. "The Navajo stories talk about skinwalkers as witches who have committed terrible acts to gain their power, taboo violations, murders, but Subject 17, we don't know what it is, where it came from, how old it is. We only know that it shouldn't exist and that it wants out." "Wants out badly," David whispered. Dr. Voss entered the mess hall precisely at 7:45, her white coat somehow immaculate despite the facility's pervasive grime. "Dr. Vance, finish your breakfast. We descend to floor 99 at 800. "Floor 99. I thought we were studying it from the control room." "Observation requires proximity," she smiled, and it didn't reach her eyes. "Don't worry, the enclosure is secure. Subject 17 cannot reach you." But her words felt like lies, or perhaps like truths that had expired, like milk left too long in the sun. The elevator to floor 99 required additional clearance, DNA verification this time, a cheek swab that Dr. Voss administered with clinical detachment. The car was smaller than the main elevator, barely large enough for the 2 of us, and it descended with a whine of strained machinery that suggested great depth, great weight, great age. "How long has Subject 17 been here?" I asked, trying to fill the silence. "The facility was built in 1987. Subject 17 was captured in 2003. "Captured? How do you capture something like that?" Dr. Voss's jaw tightened. "At great cost. The capture team consisted of 47 Special Forces operatives. 12 survived. The method remains classified, but I can tell you this. Whatever they used to trap it, they destroyed immediately afterward. They said it was too dangerous to exist, even as a tool." The elevator stopped, and the doors opened onto something impossible. Floor 99 wasn't a floor at all. It was a cavern, a vast underground space that stretched beyond the reach of the artificial lighting, filled with trees that shouldn't have been able to grow without sunlight, with a sky painted on the ceiling in shades of false twilight, with sounds that mimicked a forest at dusk, but originated from no living thing I could identify. "The enclosure," Dr. Voss said, "covers approximately 3 square miles. We constructed it to simulate the creature's natural habitat, or what we believe its natural habitat might be. The trees are artificial but convincing. The soil is real, imported from various locations where skinwalker activity has been reported." Why go to all this trouble?" "Because Subject 17 becomes unstable in purely artificial environments. The containment breach 6 months ago occurred because we tried to move it to a standard cell, steel walls, concrete floor. It broke through in 17 minutes, killed everyone in its path." She led me along a path that wound through the artificial forest, our footsteps silent on the manufactured earth. The trees were too perfect, I realized. Too uniform. Real forests had chaos, fallen branches, uneven growth, the randomness of natural systems. This place had the uncanny regularity of something designed by minds that didn't understand what they were copying. "We're approaching the observation deck," Dr. Voss said. "Stay behind the glass. Do not make sudden movements. Do not speak unless I indicate it's safe. And whatever you do, do not meet its eyes." "Its eyes? Why not its eyes?" She didn't answer. We had reached the observation deck, a platform of reinforced glass suspended over a clearing in the artificial forest. Below us, the manufactured trees gave way to a space perhaps 50 feet across, filled with arrangements of stones and bones that hurt to look at, that seemed to shift when viewed from the corner of my eye. And in the center of the clearing, waiting for us, was Subject 17. It wore the shape of a human, but wrong. The proportions were subtly off, arms too long, legs jointed in directions that shouldn't have been possible, neck elongated like a swan's but thick with corded muscle. It stood perhaps 7 feet tall, naked and hairless, its skin the color of mushrooms that grow in places where the sun never reaches. But its face was the worst part. It had no face of its own. Instead, it wore faces the way I might wear masks, shifting between them with a speed that made me dizzy. I saw an old woman with cataract-clouded eyes, a young man with acne scars, a child with a birthmark on her cheek, a soldier with a shrapnel wound still weeping blood. Each face lingered for only a moment before dissolving into the next, and each face was wrong in ways I couldn't articulate, wrong in ways that made my stomach clench and my vision blur. "It knows we're here," Dr. Voss whispered. "Don't move." Subject 17 turned toward us, and its face settled on something new, something that made me gasp and step back, my hand flying to my mouth. It wore my mother's face. Not a perfect copy. There were subtle errors, the spacing of the eyes slightly off, the smile too wide, the teeth too numerous, but close enough to recognition that I felt my knees buckle, felt the world tilt around me. "Elena," it said, and its voice was my mother's voice, the voice that had read me bedtime stories, that had called me home for dinner, that I had last heard on the phone 3 years ago, the day before the car accident that took her life. "Elena, baby, why did you leave me?" "Don't listen," Dr. Voss commanded, but her voice seemed distant, muffled, as though I were underwater. "It's not real. It pulls from your memories, your fears. It doesn't know her. It only knows how to wear her." But the thing wearing my mother's face smiled, and the smile was my mother's smile, and it raised a hand that was almost the right shape and pressed it against the glass of the observation deck. "I miss you, baby. I miss you so much. Come down here, come down and let me hold you." "No," the word tore from my throat, ragged and desperate. "You're not her, you're not her." The face shifted, and now it wore something else, something that looked almost like me but twisted, stretched, made monstrous. "Then come down and let me become you," it whispered, and its voice was my voice, my own voice turned inside out, made hungry, made endless. "Let me wear your skin. Let me walk in your world. Let me." Dr. Voss grabbed my arm and pulled me back from the glass. "We're leaving, now." She half-dragged me to the elevator, and I didn't resist, couldn't resist. My eyes fixed on the creature below that now wore my face and waved goodbye with my hand, my mother's smile still flickering beneath the surface like a reflection in disturbed water. The elevator doors closed, and I collapsed against the wall, shaking so violently my teeth chattered. "It knows you now," Dr. Voss said, and for the first time I heard fear in her voice. "It tasted your fear. It sampled your memories. Next time it will be better. Next time the face will be perfect." "Why?" I managed. "Why show me that? Why bring me here at all?" "Because we need to understand it. Because if we don't learn how to kill it, how to truly kill it, it will get out. And if it gets out—" She paused, choosing her words with terrible care. "There are older things in the world than humanity, Dr. Vance. Older and hungrier. Subject 17 is one of them, and it's been patient for a very long time." The elevator ascended, and I tried to forget my mother's face on that monstrous body, tried to forget my own voice whispering invitations I would never accept. But some memories don't fade. Some memories wear you, the way Subject 17 wore faces, and you can never truly be free of them. When we reached floor 90, I vomited in the corridor, and Dr. Voss waited with the patience of someone who had seen this before, who would see it again, until I could stand and walk and pretend I was still the person I had been before I looked into the face of something that shouldn't exist. But I wasn't. I knew that even then. I had seen what waited in the dark, and it had seen me, and the transaction was complete. I belonged to it now, in some way I couldn't understand but felt with absolute certainty. I belonged to Subject 17, and it would collect its debt in time. Chapter 4: The Research. The days that followed blurred into a routine that felt like madness. We woke, we ate, we studied, we slept, or tried to sleep, and through it all, the presence of Subject 17 hung over us like a storm that never broke. My official assignment was anthropological analysis, documenting the creature's behavior, cataloging its transformations, attempting to understand its motivations if it had any. But the work felt futile from the start. How do you study something that exists outside the boundaries of natural law? How do you categorize behaviors that serve no biological purpose, follow no evolutionary logic? It doesn't eat, Webb told me on my third day as we reviewed footage from the enclosure's hidden cameras. Not in any way we can measure. We've tried introducing livestock, deer, even human remains from the morgue. It ignores them. It doesn't sleep. It doesn't eliminate waste. As far as we can tell, it simply exists. Then what does it want? Webb paused the footage. On screen, Subject 17 stood motionless in the artificial forest, its face cycling through identities faster than the camera's frame rate could capture. We think it wants out, but that's too simple, too human. I think it wants something else. I think it wants company. Company. Think about it. It's been down there for 20 years. 20 years alone in the dark with only occasional visitors to torment. The Navajo stories say skinwalkers are created when someone commits the ultimate taboo, killing a family member, incest, cannibalism. They're outcasts, pariahs. Maybe Subject 17 isn't just hungry. Maybe it's lonely. The idea was almost worse than simple predation. A lonely god, trapped in the dark, wearing faces to remember what it meant to be human. That's why it mimics voices, David added, joining us at the monitor. He looked worse than he had 3 days ago, dark circles under his eyes, hands that shook constantly. It wants conversation, connection. It just doesn't know how to do it without destroying the thing it wants to connect with. That's very poetic for a scientific analysis, I said. I've had time to think. David's laugh was brittle. Time and nightmares. It visits me, in my dreams. It wears my mother's face, my father's face, my little sister who died when I was 10. It tells me things it shouldn't know. What kind of things? He looked at me and his eyes were hollow, empty, already half gone. It told me how my sister really died, not the story my parents told me, the truth. She didn't fall down the stairs. My father pushed her. He was drunk and she wouldn't stop crying and he pushed her. And then he and my mother made up the story and they never told me and they never told anyone and they carried that secret to their graves. David, how could it know that? I don't know. I called my aunt after the first dream, the one where it told me. She confirmed it. She'd always suspected, she said. She was glad I finally knew. He laughed again and it sounded like breaking glass. I'm glad too, I guess. But now I can't stop thinking about what else it knows, what else it's going to tell me. Dr. Voss found us there an hour later, and her expression when she saw David's state suggested this wasn't the first time she'd witnessed this particular deterioration. David, go to your quarters, take your medication, sleep. It doesn't help, it knows my dreams, it waits there. Go now. He went, shuffling like an old man, and Dr. Voss turned to me with an expression I couldn't read. David was the brightest of the interns, top of his class at MIT, full scholarship. He volunteered for Section 9 because he wanted to make a difference. What happened to him? Subject 17 happened. It always happens eventually. They all break one way or another. Some go mad, some kill themselves. A few have tried to kill it, which never ends well. She paused, and for a moment the mask slipped, and I saw the exhaustion, the fear, the desperate hope that had kept her here long past any rational limit. You're strong, Dr. Vance, I can see that, but everyone has a breaking point. Everyone. Why do you stay? She didn't answer. She just walked away, her white coat disappearing around a corner, and I was left with the monitors and the footage of Subject 17 standing motionless in its artificial forest, waiting for something it couldn't name, wearing faces it had stolen from the dead. I worked late that night, reviewing behavioral logs, trying to find patterns in the chaos. The creature's activities seemed random. Sometimes it would stand motionless for days. Sometimes it would race through the enclosure with inhuman speed. Sometimes it would arrange the bones and stones in configurations that hurt to look at, that seemed to suggest meanings just beyond comprehension. At 2 a.m. I heard footsteps in the corridor outside the research room. Slow, deliberate, wrong. Dr. Voss, I called, but my voice came out as a whisper. The footsteps stopped. Then from directly outside the door, Dr. Vance, are you there? It was Dr. Voss's voice. Perfect, exact, every intonation correct. But Dr. Voss had left hours ago, and the voice came from too low, as though the speaker were crouching or had too many joints in their legs. I need to talk to you, Dr. Vance. It's important, about Subject 17. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I sat frozen at my desk, staring at the door, knowing with absolute certainty that whatever stood on the other side wasn't Dr. Voss, wasn't human, wasn't anything that should exist in the world of the living. Please, Dr. Vance, I'm worried about you. You're working too hard. You need rest. You need. The voice shifted, became my mother's voice, became my voice, became 100 voices speaking in chorus. You need to let me in. The doorknob turned. The door was locked. I had locked it, but the knob turned anyway, slowly, accompanied by the sound of metal straining, of mechanisms that shouldn't have been able to move beginning to surrender. I grabbed the emergency phone and dialed security. This is Dr. Vance in Research Room 4. There's something at my door, something pretending to be Dr. Voss. Static on the line. Then, Dr. Vance, this is Security Chief Morrison. Dr. Voss is standing right here. She's been in the control room for the past 3 hours. Whatever's at your door, it's not her. The doorknob stopped turning. Silence stretched, long and terrible. Then from the other side of the door, my own voice whispered, I'll remember this, Elena. I'll remember how afraid you were, and next time I won't knock. Footsteps retreated down the corridor. Not Dr. Voss's footsteps, but something heavier, something that clicked and scraped and dragged. I sat at my desk until dawn, not moving, not blinking, waiting for the thing to return. It didn't, but I knew with the certainty of the hunted that it would, that it was patient, that it had all the time in the world. In the morning, I found scratches on the outside of the door, deep grooves in the reinforced steel that looked almost like letters, almost like words. When I showed them to Dr. Voss, she went pale and ordered the door replaced immediately. What did they say? I asked. The scratches, they looked like writing. They were, she said, and wouldn't meet my eyes. They said soon. I didn't sleep in my quarters that night. I slept in the control room, on a cot that Chen set up for me, surrounded by monitors and the hum of electronics and the distant, constant awareness that somewhere below us, something ancient and patient was planning its escape. And somewhere in the depths of that sleepless night, I realized the truth. Subject 17 wasn't just studying us. It was learning. It was practicing. It was preparing for something that would make the previous breach look like a minor inconvenience. We were running out of time, and none of us knew how much we had left. Chapter 5: The Transfer. The new containment unit arrived on a Tuesday. delivered by a convoy of unmarked trucks and soldiers who wouldn't meet our eyes. It was massive, a cube of silver-lined steel and reinforced glass, equipped with ultrasonic dampeners and electromagnetic field generators, designed to be the most secure prison ever constructed for something that shouldn't exist. "This is our best chance," Dr. Voss announced at the briefing, her voice carrying that particular tone of forced optimism that suggested she didn't believe her own words. "Subject 17 has been in the forest enclosure for 20 years. The environment is too familiar, too comfortable. If we can move it to the new unit, we can study it properly, control it." "And if we can't move it," I asked. "Then we contain the breach and try again." She didn't look at me when she said it. "The transfer is scheduled for Thursday. All non-essential personnel will evacuate to Section 8. The containment team will consist of myself, Dr. Webb, Security Chief Morrison, and 12 Special Forces operatives." "What about me?" "You're not trained for field operations." "I'm trained to observe, to document. You brought me here to study Subject 17, and I've barely seen it since the first day." Dr. Voss studied me for a long moment, her washed-out denim eyes searching for something I couldn't identify. "You're afraid of it." "Of course I'm afraid of it. Anyone with sense would be afraid of it." "Good, fear keeps you alive, but don't let it control you." She made a note on her tablet. "You can observe from the secondary control room on floor 95, but if I give the order to evacuate, you evacuate. No questions, no hesitation." "Understood." I spent the next 2 days preparing, reviewing containment protocols, studying the new unit specifications until I could recite them in my sleep. The unit was impressive, a technological marvel designed by some of the brightest minds in the field. But I kept thinking about what Webb had said. Subject 17 had broken through a standard cell in 17 minutes. How long would this new prison hold it? Thursday dawned with the kind of heavy silence that precedes storms. The facility felt different, tense, expectant, like a held breath. The Special Forces team arrived at 600, 12 men and women in tactical gear that made them look like insects, armored and faceless. Their commander was a woman named Captain Reyes, with close-cropped hair and eyes that had seen too much. She briefed her team in clipped, efficient sentences, mapping out positions, escape routes, contingency plans. But I noticed the way her hand kept drifting to the silver pendant at her throat, a protection symbol, I realized, something from her grandmother's traditions. "You believe in this stuff?" I asked her during a break. "I believe in what I've seen," she said, "and I've seen things that don't fit in any rational worldview." "Like what?" She looked at me and her eyes were old, so old. "My unit was deployed to a village in Guatemala 3 years ago. Some kind of outbreak, they told us, biological contamination, but when we got there," she shook her head, "the villagers weren't sick, they were changed, wearing each other's faces, speaking with each other's voices. We lost half my team before we figured out how to kill them. Fire. Only fire worked." "You think Subject 17 is like that?" "I think it's worse. I think whatever's in that enclosure has been practicing for a very long time." At 800, we descended. The containment team took the main elevator to floor 99, while I went with Chen to the secondary control room on floor 95. The room was small, cramped, dominated by a single monitor showing feeds from the enclosure and the new unit. "They're in position," Chen said, her voice tight with tension. On screen, I could see the team spreading out through the artificial forest, moving with practiced precision. Dr. Voss and Webb stood near the new unit, which had been positioned at the edge of the clearing. The Special Forces operatives took up defensive positions, weapons ready. "Subject 17 is in the northeast quadrant," Morrison's voice crackled over the radio. "Moving slowly, seems unaware of our presence." "Proceed with sedation," Dr. Voss ordered. "Use the gas canisters." 2 operatives advanced, carrying devices that looked like modified fire extinguishers. They reached the edge of the clearing, took aim, and fired. The gas was invisible on camera, but I could see its effect. Subject 17, which had been standing motionless among the artificial trees, suddenly stiffened. Its face, currently wearing that of an elderly man with a white beard, twisted in what might have been surprise or rage. It took a step forward, then another, then collapsed. "Target down," Morrison reported, moving in to secure. The operatives approached cautiously, weapons trained on the motionless form. They checked for vital signs, a formality since Subject 17 didn't have vital signs in any conventional sense, then signaled the all clear. "Begin transfer," Dr. Voss ordered. They loaded Subject 17 onto a gurney, strapping it down with silver-lined restraints. The creature looked small, vulnerable, almost human in its unconsciousness. But I knew what it was. I knew what waited beneath that borrowed face. The procession moved slowly through the artificial forest, the operatives forming a protective cordon around the gurney. They reached the new unit without incident, and Dr. Voss keyed in the access code. The door slid open, revealing a space that looked almost medical: white walls, observation windows, a single examination table in the center. "Load the subject," Dr. Voss commanded. They wheeled the gurney inside, positioned it next to the examination table, and began the transfer. Two operatives lifted Subject 17, while a third prepared new restraints. That's when it moved. Not the gradual awakening of sedation wearing off, but a sudden, violent explosion of motion. Subject 17's arm, the arm that should have been secured, lashed out, catching one operative in the throat with fingers that suddenly ended in claws. The man's scream became a gurgle as blood fountained from severed arteries. "Breach," Morrison screamed. "Breach all units." Subject 17 was already moving. It flowed off the gurney with a liquid grace that shouldn't have been possible, its body shifting even as it moved, becoming longer, leaner, more wrong. Its face cycled through identities faster than the cameras could capture, and its mouth opened too wide, revealing rows of teeth that hadn't been there moments before. The operatives opened fire, but the bullets seemed to pass through it, or perhaps it moved between the bullets, existing in spaces that shouldn't have been there. It reached the second operative, a young woman with a name tag I couldn't read, and its hand closed around her skull with a pressure that made a sound like overripe fruit being crushed. "Retreat," Dr. Voss was screaming. "Retreat to the elevator." But the elevator was too far, and Subject 17 was everywhere. It moved through the artificial forest like wind through grass, appearing beside one operative, then another, leaving bodies in its wake. I saw Captain Reyes empty her entire magazine into the creature's back, saw the bullets emerge from its chest without slowing it, saw it turn and smile at her with her own face before it reached for her. "Oh God," Chen whispered beside me. "Oh God, oh God, oh God." The monitor went dark, not static dark, as though something had reached through the screen and extinguished the light. "We need to go," I said, grabbing Chen's arm. "Now." But she was frozen, staring at the dark screen, her scar livid in the red emergency lighting. "It knows we're here. It knows where we are." "Chen, move." I dragged her toward the door and we stumbled into the corridor. The alarms were blaring now, red lights pulsing in sync with the screaming sirens. Over the intercom, an automated voice repeated, "Emergency lockdown initiated. Section 9 sealed. All personnel proceed to nearest safe zone." "The elevator," Chen gasped. "We need to get to the elevator." We ran, our footsteps echoing through empty corridors that suddenly felt like tunnels, like throats, like the path to somewhere inescapable. Behind us, I could hear sounds that didn't belong in any facility built by human hands, scraping, dragging, something that might have been laughter. We reached the elevator at the same time as Dr. Voss and Webb, both of them blood-spattered and wild-eyed. Webb was supporting Dr. Voss, who clutched her left arm at an angle that suggested it was broken. "It got Morrison," Dr. Voss gasped, "and the team, all of them." "Where's David?" I asked. "His quarters. He refused to evacuate, said he wanted to talk to it." Her laugh was hysterical, broken. "He wanted to talk to it." We piled into the elevator and Dr. Voss fumbled for her keycard with her good hand. She swiped it through the reader and the display flashed. "Access DENIED. Emergency lockdown active. Ascent requires authorization." "What?" Webb stared at the display. "What do you mean, authorization?" "It's the protocol," Dr. Voss said, her voice hollow. "During a breach, you need a keycard to ascend, so nothing follows you up." "Then use your keycard." "I did, it didn't work." She tried again, and again the display flashed denial. "Someone has to authorize the override from the control room. Someone has to." The elevator shuddered, not from any mechanical failure, from impact. Something heavy had struck the doors from the outside. "It's here," Chen whispered. "It's already here." Another impact, and the reinforced steel dented inward, the metal screaming in protest. A third impact, and I could see the shape of something pressed against the doors from the outside, something with too many joints, too many angles. "The stairs," I said. "There have to be emergency stairs." "Floor 96, Dr. Voss said. "But they're sealed during lockdown, we'd need." Another impact, and the elevator doors buckled, a gap appearing between them wide enough to show darkness beyond. And in that darkness, something that might have been an eye, might have been a mouth, might have been a promise. "We need to move," I said, and I pulled the emergency release. The elevator dropped 6 inches with a scream of tortured machinery, then stopped. The doors were jammed, but I could see the gap, could see the service hatch in the ceiling. "Help me," I said, climbing onto the handrail, reaching for the hatch. Webb boosted me up and I pushed the hatch open, climbing out onto the top of the elevator car. The shaft stretched above and below us, a vertical tunnel of darkness punctuated by red emergency lights. Below, I could hear movement, not the mechanical sounds of the elevator, but something organic, something hungry. "Climb," I said, reaching down to help the others. "Climb now." We ascended the service ladder, Dr. Voss struggling with her broken arm, Chen moving with the mechanical precision of shock, Webb bringing up the rear with a desperation that made his movements jerky, uncoordinated. Below us, the sounds grew louder, scraping, clicking, something that might have been claws on metal. "It's following," Webb gasped. "It's in the shaft." "Don't look back," I said. "Just climb." We reached floor 96 and forced open the emergency exit, tumbling into a corridor that looked identical to the one we'd left, red lights and reinforced doors, and the omnipresent sense of being buried alive. The stairwell door was sealed, a red light indicating lockdown status, but beside it was a manual override panel. "Key card," I said to Dr. Voss. She shook her head. "It doesn't work. I told you someone has to authorize." "Then we find another way." But there was no other way. The corridor stretched in both directions, ending in heavy doors that wouldn't open without power, without authorization, without hope. And behind us, from the elevator shaft, came the sound of something climbing. "We need to hide," Chen said. "We need to." "There's nowhere to hide," Dr. Voss said. "It knows our scents now, our sounds, it will find us." "Then we fight," Webb said, and his voice was steady, resigned. "We fight and we die, and maybe someone upstairs will learn something from our deaths." "No," the word came from me, surprising in its certainty. "We're not dying today." I remembered the layout of the facility, the maps I'd studied during my preparation. Floor 96 was maintenance level, filled with ventilation shafts and service tunnels. If we could reach the ventilation system, we could climb to floor 90, to the main control room, to help. "This way," I said, leading them down the corridor to a door marked HVAC access. The door was locked, but the panel beside it was mechanical, not electronic. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from the wall and smashed the panel, again and again, until the mechanism broke and the door swung open. "Inside," I said, quickly. We squeezed into the maintenance space, a narrow room filled with pipes and ducts and the hum of machinery. The ventilation shaft was large enough to crawl through, barely, and I pointed to the one that angled upward. "That leads to floor 90. If we can reach the control room, we can authorize the override. We can get out." "And if we can't?" Chen asked. "Then we keep climbing until we find a way out, or until we can't climb anymore." We entered the shaft one by one, crawling through darkness that smelled of dust and old air and something else, something that might have been the breath of the mountain itself. The metal was cold against my hands, and I could feel the vibration of the facility's systems, the pulse of something vast and ancient surrounding us. Behind us in the maintenance room, something moved. I heard the door open, heard footsteps that were wrong, heard a voice that was my mother's voice saying, "Elena, where are you, baby? Come out and let me see you." I crawled faster, ignoring the pain in my knees, the ache in my shoulders, the terror that threatened to freeze me solid. The others followed, and behind us, the voice changed, became Dr. Voss's voice, became Webb's voice, became a chorus of voices speaking in unison. "We can smell you. We can taste your fear. Come back, little mice. Come back and let us play." The shaft seemed to go on forever, a tunnel of darkness that defied geometry, that suggested we were crawling not through a ventilation system but through something's throat, something's intent. And then, suddenly, there was light ahead, the red glow of floor 90's emergency lighting, filtering through a grate. I reached the grate and pushed, but it was secured from the outside, bolted in place. "Help me," I whispered, and Webb and Chen added their strength to mine, and together we forced the bolts, bent the metal, created an opening large enough to squeeze through. We tumbled into the corridor of floor 90, gasping, bleeding, alive. The control room was 50 feet away, and we ran for it, ran like the damned, and I could hear the shaft behind us filling with sound, with movement, with hunger. Dr. Voss reached the control room first, her keycard finally working, and we piled inside, slamming the door, engaging the manual lock. Through the reinforced glass, I could see the corridor, could see the ventilation grate we'd emerged from, could see it begin to bulge outward as something pressed against it from within. "The override," I said, "do it now." Dr. Voss moved to the main console, her broken arm hanging useless at her side, her good hand flying across the controls. "Emergency override authorization. Voss Margaret. Code Alpha 79 Omega." The display flashed. "Override accepted. Elevator access restored." "We need to go," Webb said. "Now before it." The ventilation grate exploded outward, and something flowed into the corridor. It was Subject 17, but changed, transformed by its freedom into something that defied description. It was larger now, its limbs elongated to impossible lengths, its body covered in faces that moved and shifted and screamed in silent agony. It wore the faces of the dead operatives, of Captain Reyes with her silver pendant, of David Okonkwo who had wanted to talk to it. "Go," Dr. Voss said, her voice steady despite everything. "I'll hold the door." "You can't hold it alone." "I'm not planning to hold it, I'm planning to slow it down." She turned to look at me and her washed-out denim eyes were clear, resolved. "There's a failsafe, a last resort. I can seal this section, flood it with liquid nitrogen. It won't kill Subject 17, but it will slow it, buy you time to reach the surface." "You'll die." "I've been dead since I first looked into its eyes." She smiled, and it was almost human. "Go, Dr. Vance, learn from this. Find a way to stop it before it stops everything." She turned back to the console, and I grabbed Chen and Webb and pulled them toward the elevator. Behind us, I heard Dr. Voss speaking into the intercom, her voice calm, controlled, saying, "Subject 17, this is Dr. Voss. I've been waiting to talk to you." And then we were in the elevator, and the doors were closing, and through the narrowing gap I saw Subject 17 turn toward the control room, saw it smile with 100 stolen faces, saw it begin to move with terrible purpose. The elevator ascended and we didn't speak, couldn't speak, our breath coming in gasps, our bodies shaking with adrenaline and grief, and the knowledge that we had left someone behind to die. At floor 80, the elevator stopped, not because we had pressed the button, but because the emergency protocols demanded it. The doors opened onto Section 8, and we stumbled out into darkness. "The power's out," Chen said. "The lockdown must have overloaded the grid." "We need to keep moving," I said. "Up, always up." We found the emergency stairs and climbed floor after floor, our muscles screaming, our lungs burning. Behind us, below us, we could feel something happening, a pressure change, a temperature drop, the distant rumble of systems engaging. Dr. Voss had activated the failsafe. She had flooded Section 9 with liquid nitrogen, had frozen herself and the creature together in a tomb of ice and steel. It wouldn't hold forever. We all knew that, but it would hold long enough. We reached the surface at dawn, emerging from the tunnel into air that tasted of freedom, of life, of the world above. The SUV was still there, and behind us, the mountain stood silent, keeping its secrets, hiding its horrors. But as we drove away, I looked back one last time and I saw something at the tunnel entrance. Something that wore Dr. Voss's face, her white coat, her washed-out denim eyes. It smiled at me, and its mouth was too wide, and its teeth were too numerous, and it raised a hand in farewell. Then the tunnel collapsed, burying the entrance under tons of rock, and I told myself I had imagined it, that shock and trauma had made me see things that weren't there. But I knew with the certainty of the hunted. Subject 17 was still down there, still waiting, still patient. And it had my scent now, it had tasted my fear. Next time it wouldn't need to knock. Chapter 6, Aftermath. The debriefing lasted 3 days. 3 days of questions, of psychological evaluations, of men in suits who wouldn't give their names asking the same things in different ways. They wanted to know everything. What we saw, what we heard, what we felt. They wanted to know if Subject 17 was dead, if Dr. Voss was dead, if the facility could be salvaged. Subject 17 is contained, I told them over and over. Dr. Voss activated the failsafe. The section is sealed. But is it dead? I don't know. I don't think it can die. Not in any way we understand. They didn't like that answer. They wanted certainty, wanted clean endings, wanted to file reports that said threat neutralized and move on to the next crisis. But some things don't offer clean endings. Some things wait in the dark, patient and eternal, and you can only hope to contain them, never destroy them. Chen was reassigned to a facility in Nevada, studying something she wouldn't talk about. Webb retired, moved to a cabin in Montana, refused all contact. I was given 6 months of paid leave, mandatory therapy, and a non-disclosure agreement that ran to 90 pages. I signed it. What else could I do? But I couldn't forget. I couldn't sleep without seeing my mother's face on that monstrous body, couldn't close my eyes without hearing my own voice whispering invitations. The therapy helped some. The medication helped some. But the fear remained, buried deep, a constant companion. 6 months later, I received a package. No return address, no postage, just a plain brown box on my doorstep. Inside was a single item, a keycard, the kind used at Mountaineer Black Site 7, and a note written in handwriting I didn't recognize but somehow knew. The seal is weakening. It remembers you. It asks for you. Come back, Alina. Come back and let me wear your face. I burned the note. I destroyed the keycard. I moved to a different city, changed my name, tried to disappear. But some things don't let you disappear. Some things follow you through dreams, through shadows, through the spaces between what is real and what is waiting. Sometimes late at night I hear footsteps outside my door. Slow, deliberate, wrong. And a voice whispers my name, my old name, my true name, and asks if I'm ready to come home. I never answer. I never open the door. I sit in the dark and wait for dawn, knowing that one day the sun won't rise, the door won't hold, and something that has worn 1,000 faces will finally wear mine. Subject 17 is patient. It has all the time in the world. And I am only human. Chapter 7: The Special Forces. The helicopter touched down at 600, 3 days after the breach. I watched from the window of my temporary quarters, a military barracks 50 miles from the mountain, as 12 figures in tactical gear disembarked, moving with the economical precision of professionals who had done this before. I had been summoned an hour earlier by a man who introduced himself only as the director. He wore a suit that cost more than my annual salary and spoke with the casual authority of someone who had never been told no. "Dr. Vance," he said, not bothering with pleasantries, "we need you to go back down." Back down into the facility. Subject 17 has been contained, but the containment is temporary. Dr. Voss's failsafe bought us time, but the liquid nitrogen is evaporating. We estimate 72 hours before the creature thaws completely. Then seal the facility, collapse the tunnels, bury it forever. We can't. For the first time, something flickered in his expression, not fear exactly, but something adjacent to it. The facility contains other assets, other subjects. We can't sacrifice the entire site. Other subjects? That's above your clearance. What matters is this. We need to move Subject 17 to a permanent containment solution. A new facility in Nevada, designed specifically for entities of this classification. And you need me for this, why? He smiled and it didn't reach his eyes. Because Subject 17 asks for you, by name. Through the monitoring equipment we lowered into the thawing zone, it knows you're alive. It wants to see you. I felt the blood drain from my face. That's insane. You can't possibly think I'd. We don't need you to descend into the enclosure. We need you to serve as bait. He pulled a tablet from his briefcase and displayed footage, grainy, dark, but unmistakable. Subject 17, frozen in a block of ice, its eyes somehow still moving, still aware. The Special Forces team will enter the facility, lure the creature into a transport unit and seal it for relocation. But they need someone the creature recognizes, someone it wants. No, absolutely not. Dr. Vance, I understand your reluctance, but consider this. If Subject 17 escapes, it won't stay in the mountains. It will hunt. It will wear faces, mimic voices, infiltrate communities. It will kill hundreds, thousands before we can stop it. And it will start with the people you know, your colleagues, your family, anyone you've ever spoken to, anyone whose face it sampled while you were in its presence. You're threatening me. I'm explaining the stakes. He leaned forward and his eyes were cold, reptilian. You have a choice. Help us contain it or spend the rest of your life waiting for it to find you. Because it will find you, Dr. Vance. It's patient, and it remembers. I thought of my mother's face on that monstrous body. I thought of my own voice whispering invitations. I thought of the footsteps outside my door, the voice in the dark, the promise of next time. If I do this, I said, I want guarantees, protection, a new identity, a life somewhere it can't find me. You'll have everything you ask for, and more. He lied, of course. I knew it even then. But I also knew he was right about one thing. Subject 17 would find me eventually. Better to face it on my terms with support than to wait for it to come knocking. The Special Forces commander was a man named Colonel Shaw, with a face like granite and eyes that had seen too much. He briefed me in a tent outside the mountain, maps and schematics spread across a folding table. The facility is compromised, he said, tracing routes with a blunt finger. Sections 8 and 9 are sealed and frozen, but the creature has shown it can manipulate electronic systems. We assume it will thaw ahead of schedule. How is that possible? We don't know, that's why we need to move fast. He pointed to a route marked in red. We enter through the service tunnel, descend to floor 95, and deploy the transport unit. You will be positioned here. He indicated a secondary control room, with a direct line of sight to the creature's likely approach routes. And when it sees me, you activate the lure protocol. He held up a device that looked like a modified radio. This emits a frequency that disrupts the creature's sensory perception. It will follow the signal, thinking it's following you, and enter the transport unit. Once inside, we seal it and extract. That sounds too simple. It's not simple, it's desperate. He met my eyes, and for a moment the granite cracked, showing something human beneath. I've lost good people to things like this. Things that shouldn't exist. I'm asking you to risk your life because I don't have better options. Because if we don't stop this thing here, I don't know if we can stop it at all. What makes you think this will work? Because it wants you specifically. That gives us leverage. The question is whether you're willing to use it. I looked at the maps, at the red lines descending into darkness, at the notations marking previous casualties, previous failures. 12 operatives had died in the first breach. How many would die in this attempt? I'll do it, I said, but I have conditions. Name them. I want a weapon, something that can hurt it even if only a little, and I want a way out. If this goes wrong, I want an escape route that doesn't depend on anyone else. Shaw nodded slowly. The weapon we can manage, silver-tipped rounds based on Navajo traditions. They won't kill it, but they might slow it down. As for the escape route, he pulled out another schematic, this one showing ventilation shafts and service tunnels. There's an emergency exit on floor 92, leads to a vertical shaft that connects to the surface. It's a 300-foot climb, but it's possible. Show me. He showed me, and as I memorized the route, the turns, the landmarks, I felt something I hadn't felt since the first descent. Hope. Fragile, desperate, probably foolish, but hope nonetheless. We entered the facility at 1412 operatives plus Shaw and myself. The tunnel was different from my first arrival, damaged, debris-strewn, marked with signs of violence that made my stomach clench. Bloodstains on the concrete, scratches in the steel walls, and everywhere the sense of something waiting, watching, patient. Stay close, Shaw murmured, and remember, if I say run, you run. The elevator was dead, frozen in place somewhere below. We took the emergency stairs, descending floor by floor, our flashlights cutting through darkness that seemed to resist them, to swallow the light. Floor 80 was empty, Section 8 still sealed. Floor 85 showed signs of damage, doors torn from hinges, walls scorched by fire. Floor 90 was worse, the control room a wreck of shattered monitors and frozen blood. It was here, one of the operatives whispered, recently. How do you know? I asked. He pointed to the floor, footprints in the frost, human-shaped but with claws and too many toes. They led from the sealed Section 9 entrance toward the stairs we had just descended. It's hunting, Shaw said, his voice tight. It knows we're here. Then we move faster. We reached floor 95 at 14:30, the secondary control room intact but cold, so cold my breath fogged the air. Shaw positioned his team at the access points, setting up barriers and weapons, preparing for something that defied preparation. You know your role, he said to me. Activate the lure when you see it. We'll handle the rest. I took my position by the observation window, looking out into a corridor that stretched into darkness. The transport unit was positioned at the far end, its doors open, its interior lined with silver and ultraviolet lights. Beginning thaw monitoring, a technician said, checking portable sensors. Temperature in Section 9 is rising. Estimated time to full mobility, 40 minutes. It knows, I whispered. It knows we're waiting. That's the point, Shaw said. We want it to know, we want it to come to us. We waited. The minutes crawled by, each one an eternity of tension and fear. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, feel the sweat on my palms despite the cold. The operatives were silent, professional, but I could see it in their eyes, the knowledge that they were hunting something that couldn't be hunted, something that had already killed dozens of people just like them. At 15:15, the temperature spiked. The sensors screamed warnings and the technician paled. "It's moving. It's out of the ice." "Positions," Shaw commanded. "Remember your training, remember your weapons. And remember, this thing dies like anything else. It just takes more effort." He was wrong, of course. Subject 17 didn't die, but I didn't say that. I just gripped the lure device and waited. It came from the ventilation shaft. We were watching the doors, the corridors, the obvious routes. But Subject 17 had learned from our previous encounter. It knew about the vents, knew about the service tunnels, knew about the spaces between walls where humans didn't think to look. The grate in the ceiling exploded outward and something dropped into the corridor. It was Subject 17, but changed again, transformed by its time in the ice into something even more wrong. Its skin was mottled blue and white, frostbitten and peeling, revealing glimpses of something darker beneath. Its limbs were longer, jointed in more places, moving with a fluidity that suggested bones that weren't solid, muscles that weren't fixed. And its face was mine. Perfect, exact, every detail correct, from the scar on my chin to the way my hair fell across my forehead. It wore me like a mask, like a promise, like a threat. "Alina," it said, and its voice was my voice, my exact voice, with my accent and my cadence and my fear. "You came back. I knew you would." "Activate the lure," Shaw commanded. I pressed the button. The device hummed to life, emitting a high-pitched whine that made my teeth ache. Subject 17 turned toward the sound, its head tilting at an angle that shouldn't have been possible. "Clever," it said, still using my voice. "But I can smell you, Alina. I can taste your fear. The sound is just sound. You're the bait. You've always been the bait." It moved. God, it moved fast. One moment it was at the far end of the corridor, the next it was among the operatives, flowing between them like water, its hands. My hands, reaching out to touch, to tear, to transform. The first operative died without a scream, his throat opened by fingers that ended in claws. The second managed to fire 3 rounds before something that looked like my arm wrapped around her neck and twisted. The third, the fourth, the fifth. They fell like wheat before a scythe, and Subject 17 moved through them without slowing, without hesitation, wearing my face and my voice and my death. "Run!" Shaw screamed, and I ran. I sprinted toward the emergency exit on floor 92, hearing the sounds of battle behind me, the screams and gunfire and something that might have been laughter. I reached the exit and plunged into the ventilation shaft, climbing upward with desperate strength, my hands finding purchase on metal rungs, my feet pushing against the walls. Below me, I could hear Shaw following, could hear the last of his team dying, could hear Subject 17 calling my name in my own voice. "Alina, don't leave me. We could be together. I could wear you forever." I climbed faster, ignoring the pain in my arms, the burning in my lungs. Floor 90, floor 85, floor 80. The shaft seemed endless, a vertical tunnel through the mountain's heart, and behind me, below me, I could feel it climbing, could feel its hunger reaching up to claim me. At floor 75, Shaw caught up. His face was bloodied, his armor torn, but he was alive, somehow alive. "It killed them," he gasped. "All of them, it's still coming." "Then we keep climbing." We climbed. Floor 70, floor 65, floor 60. The shaft narrowed, the rungs farther apart, the darkness absolute. I could feel Subject 17 below us, could feel its presence like a weight, like a promise, like a door opening that could never be closed. At floor 55, Shaw's hand slipped. He fell, just for a moment, just enough to lose his grip, and I reached down and grabbed his wrist, holding him with strength I didn't know I had. "Climb," I commanded, Climb now. He found his footing and we ascended together, two humans against something that had existed before humans that would exist after. Floor 50, floor 45, floor 40. It's slowing, Shaw gasped. I think it's turning back. I didn't dare look down. I just climbed, rung after rung, until my hands were bloody and my arms were numb, and my mind was blank with exhaustion. We reached the surface at dusk, emerging from a hidden grate in the forest floor, gasping, bleeding, alive. The mountain loomed above us, silent and ancient, hiding its secrets. It let us go, Shaw said, his voice hollow. It could have caught us, it chose not to. Why? Because it wants you alive. It wants you to know it's coming. It wants. He shook his head. I don't know what it wants, but this isn't over. He was right. As we stumbled toward the extraction point, I looked back at the mountain one last time, and in the gathering dark I saw something at the tunnel entrance. Something that wore my face, that raised my hand in farewell, that smiled with my mouth and my teeth and my promise. Next time, it whispered, and the wind carried the words to my ears. Next time, Alina. We were flown to a medical facility, treated for hypothermia and exhaustion, debriefed by men in suits who didn't believe our reports or pretended not to. Subject 17 was classified as contained but active, a new category that meant nothing and everything. I was given a new identity, a new life, a small apartment in a city far from the mountains. I tried to forget. I tried to live. But some things don't let you forget. Some things wait in the dark, patient and eternal, wearing your face, speaking with your voice, promising a union that would mean the end of everything you are. Sometimes late at night I hear footsteps outside my door, and a voice whispers my name, my true name, and asks if I'm ready to come home. I never answer. I never open the door. I sit in the dark and wait for dawn, knowing that one day the sun won't rise, the door won't hold, and something that has worn 1,000 faces will finally wear mine. Subject 17 is patient. It has all the time in the world. And I am only human. Thank you for listening to tonight's stories. If you enjoyed them, please leave a like and subscribe.